I'm glad you guys are here. Maybe we'll get a few more to join in to talk about this NAR Clear Cooperation stuff. Obviously, when NAR drops some news on how we do business and our MLS rules, that becomes kind of a big deal for a lot of us. And so I wanted to just take a minute to jump on, talk through what NAR has released, share some insight I've kind of come up with over the last 24 hours or so as I've talked to a few different people, and just make sure that we're all kind of on the same page as to what's actually going on here, give you a little bit of insight, some things to watch out for. So stick with me, because at the end, I'm going to talk through some of the problems that exist with some of the stuff that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about, because there's just some issues with everything that's going on. So to start with, though, we got this, where do we start with? We probably all got this letter that came out, right, from Kevin Sears, and this is a little bit easier article to follow that they put out through Realtor Magazine. And so I just want to kind of walk through a little bit and talk about what some of this stuff means, because at the end of the day, what we're really looking at here is, who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but this piece is informed consumer choice that they're talking about, right? Because there's a bigger fight going on with clear cooperation policy. And just as we may or may not know, clear cooperation is that policy that says when you get a listing, you have to enter it into the MLS and share that with the rest of us so we can bring buyers within one business day after that listing agreement is signed and goes active. And so there are some brokerages out there that don't want that. There's some CEOs of big companies talking about how they want to get rid of clear cooperation policy. Some want to change clear cooperation policy. And so now it's been pending before NAR. And the question is, what are they going to do and get rid of? Because you can imagine if they got rid of it and we go back to a period pre-2019, but with some more advanced technology and things, a lot of brokerages could use their market size and power to say, look, we're going to keep more listings in-house and not share them, not put them on the MLS, not cooperate. And that certainly makes a lot of our jobs a little bit harder when we don't have access to the full market. So I'm personally a big, my bias is in favor of clear cooperation. So what was this change, though? It's I think in the grand scheme of things, this is not like a major change. And especially as we kind of go through this, you'll see it's really probably not that big of a change, but there's a couple of things in here you certainly need to know about. So what they did is they added in this like delayed marketing piece. And what it does is it allows you with the seller's choice. So this is kind of the first requirement, is you have to have the sellers make this decision. And what it does is it says, I'm still going to put the listing in the MLS, and I'm still going to make it available for other agents to show. But what I'm not going to do for a period of time is syndicate it out to IDX feeds or to Zillows and Realtor.coms and Homes.coms. And so it just is a limited period of time, much like a coming soon might be, where you can be coming soon for a certain period of time. This will be where you could choose, the seller could choose for a certain period of time to not have their listing syndicate to other agents' IDX feeds on their websites and out there on the internet. We'll get into the whys here in a minute, but that's the idea at the base. Now, some other things that go along with it. How long can it be? Well, that's going to be MLS by MLS, because what NAR did here is they punted to the MLSs because NAR is trying to get rid of liability on themselves, I think is a big piece of this. And so they said, sure, every MLS by September 30th, you guys get together and decide how long you want to give for this delayed marketing period. And so different MLSs could say, we'll give it 7 days, we'll give it 14 or 21, we don't know. So how long that will be, we'll see, but that will be the longest period. And it would be kind of like a coming soon where you get to the end of that period and then it'll automatically start syndicating. The next piece you have to have is a signed disclosure. So the seller is going to have to sign something that says, yes, I agree to this delayed marketing, which is real similar to our office exclusives. And we'll go through each one of these categories because there's a lot of nuances going on here. So much like an exempt exclusive office listing, you have to have that same sort of seller disclosure. And again, the last piece is MLS visibility still required. So it has to be on the MLS. All it's doing is delayed from displaying through IDX fees and syndicating to other, the Zillows of the world. Okay, I mean, that's fine. Here's the thing though, like when we really get through that sort of stuff, at the end of the day, like we've always actually had that option. So I don't know that they've really added a whole lot here, because we've always had that option when entering a listing to put no internet, right? And some different MLSs have different options, but there's always been that option. I say always, at least as long as I can remember anyway, there's the option to withhold it from syndication. Somebody that maybe has more MLS nuance might know kind of how long that's been there, but you've always had that ability to withhold it from the internet syndication. This is just adding it in where it's sort of a specific period that we're going to call it delayed marketing. So you kind of already had this. So they're not really adding anything new as far as I can tell. It's just you do it for a certain period. And now there may be a new classification in the MLS that's not active. It's delayed marketing. Okay, that's fine. So we've had that option. This is just sort of a piece that goes along with it. As far as what that means, like if I'm a buyer's agent and a lot of people on the selling side, the listing side, take advantage of this, then yes, that really emphasizes the value of using a buyer's agent MLS participant. Because you could say, yeah, we have all the listings that are on Zillow. I can show you those. But I can also show you these sort of secret listings that aren't out there on Zillow and homes.com that only we have access to as MLS participants. And these are going to be newer properties to the market. So that's a good reason why you want to come use me, because I've got access to all of those that you don't have access to. So maybe that emphasizes the value of a real estate agent. That's great. But the flip side is what I'm having trouble understanding, and please leave a comment, let me know what you think, is why would I do this on the seller side? Because you have to go to a seller and say, look, we're going to put it in the MLS. It's going to be available for other agents to see, but we're not going to put it on Zillow and Realtor.com and Homes.com for a week or 10 days or 14 days. I have a real hard time figuring out how to justify that to a seller, like why that's good for them, right? Because at the end of the day, like my job is to sell their house for the best deal possible. And the way I generally get that is exposing it to the largest amount of market possible so it's competitive, get the most number of buyers. So when you go to a seller and say, I'm not going to put it on Zillow, and they're going to say, why? Like, why? And what's the answer going to be to that? So while there may be a benefit to say, I've got access to these secret listings that are only on the MLS for the first couple of weeks or whatever, I have like, why, how am I going to justify that with a seller? Why would I do that? I'm having trouble understanding where the benefit is to a seller to do that, because we know, like, here's the deal. Tried to look up some stats here, and this is the most recent I could find. So presumably these are reasonable stats, but of course, like they say, nearly all buyers, 95% use online tools, right? And of course, where do they go? Well, Zillow gets average 87 million monthly visitors. They go to Zillow, they go to Realtor.com, they go to Redfin, they go to Trulia and Homes.com. Those are our top 5. And that may be a little hard to see, but like what we see is, let me zoom in a little bit there. Right? They're getting 90 million, 30 million, 15 million monthly views, or however many it actually is. Like, this is, how do we justify to say, I'm not going to put that on there? Like, that's where the buyers are. That's where they're looking. So kind of interesting. Kaylee said, what do you say? Our brokers discussed it this morning. The only scenario we came up with for the seller benefit was for privacy purposes, not giving it to the entire public, only the ones who are seriously active looking with a realtor. Yeah, I mean, if you have a seller that has, significant privacy concerns, that might be there. I think to me, it's like there's going to be that little less than 1% niche kind of properties where maybe you don't want this done. But for like 99.8% of properties, like what's the benefit to a seller here? It's hard for me to justify. And a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or so, they talked about this on the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. They had a broker from Florida. And this really gets into the office exclusives, but I think this is in the same category because who am I worried about getting sued by? One is my seller. And they had an experience where they had an office exclusive listing and then they sold it. Seller came back and was mad because they said, hey, you didn't put this on the open market for everybody. I could have got more money, but you convinced me to do an office exclusive. So I'm suing you for the value that I lost in selling my property. And they ended up settling that case, what he said, which is kind of a little bit of at least we've got some risk here, we've got some exposure. And I think that's the scenario that if you're going to talk to a seller about this, they need to understand that the statistics show, this is every study that I've ever seen on it, by listing it in the MLS to the public market, houses sell for more than when you don't. That's just like the bottom line. We can argue over how much and all this, but like you're going to have a hard time proving its value is higher by keeping it off the market. So there's a trade-off from and being able to inform them to say, seller, if we're going to keep it off the MLS and off the public market and off the internet, you got to understand there's a pretty good chance you're going to get less value than if we did. So what are the trade-offs? Why do you want to do that? And if we don't have that kind of informed consent, you're exposing yourself to liability. I think it's a real potential problem. So that's where there may be some tiny percentage niche things where that might come into play. But at the end of the day, we always had the ability to keep it off the internet anyway by checking no internet. And now this is just sort of a temporary status for that. Okay, fine. But let's talk about something else that came up in here that I think is actually the bigger deal. Let me find it here. It's this one down here where this gets into office exclusives, okay? I'm not finding it immediately. Oh, here we go. So office exclusives, before I jump to that, office exclusives is the idea that I'm going to submit a form, get the seller to sign it, that we're not going to make this active in the MLS. We're not going to put it in the MLS. It's not going to be syndicated out to the internet, to any IDX feeds or anything else. And I can't publicly market it, which means I can't put a sign in the yard. I can't do, an email blast outside. I can only market it to existing clients of my brokerage. So it's a very, very limited rule. And so if you went anywhere outside of that, you're now publicly marketing it and you have to put it in the MLS active. Otherwise, you're violating the MLS rules. Well, they made a clarification here. And I think this is actually, in my opinion, the one thing that is kind of a big deal. They said that one-to-one communication about listings from the listing broker does not trigger the Clear Cooperation policy guidelines. However, multi-broker communications that would constitute public marketing. Okay, so this would mean if I have an office exclusive, before I couldn't go outside of my brokerage, they're kind of clarifying here saying if I have an office exclusive, I can then call other agents and brokers one-to-one and talk to them about that listing and try to sell it. That's a pretty big change. To me, that's noteworthy. And again, I think that there are certain niche properties where, keeping it as an office exclusive can make sense, but that's the far exception, not the rule. And so here's the problems I see with this is they're kind of opening it up a little bit. If you're going to do that, I want you to do it the right way. By all means, do the office exclusive if it's right for that property. You've had disclosure to the seller. You've informed them by doing that. There could be a loss in price because it's not as competitive, et cetera, et cetera. And they decide, yes, I still want to do it. And you say, great, I can call other brokers. So I could say, hey, I'm gonna call Kaylee because this is a particular property that's really dilapidated and it really needs somebody to come in and flip it. And I don't want to just put it out there for everybody. And so I'm gonna call Kaylee because I know she's got some investors she works with and we're gonna try to do this deal, right? I mean, whatever it happens to be. Great, that's fine, I can do that. Where the problem I foresee is where we actually start to run into potential antitrust issues is brokerages deciding I'm going to like, hey, let's get together and I'll send you all my office exclusives if you send me all your office exclusives. Now we've got competitors that are basically doing a boycott on other competitors in the marketplace. And so if you have brokers getting together and say, hey, we're going to do more office exclusives, but I'll send you mine if you send me yours, that is a train wreck waiting to happen. And that's going to get you sued by another broker because you're trying to basically anti-compete, do anti-competitive activities to keep them out of the marketplace. I think that is a real risk. And like, that means, there's just a lot of potential problems that you could come up with there. So I think that is a cautionary tale that I want people to at least think about if you're going to do that. Heather's got a big comment here. Let me see what she said. During the first 2 weeks, it's probably can't see all that, but that's okay. During the first 2 weeks, your home will not be listed on public platforms like Zillow, Realtor.com, etc. Instead, we'll market it exclusively to a network of serious qualified buyers through private channels in the MLS. You may be wondering why. Here's the reason. Once a property hits sites like Zillow, it becomes subject to automated tools like Zestimates, which can inaccurately influence buyer perception. These platforms attract casual buyers, opportunistic buyers, etc. By holding off on publicly listing sites initially, we create a sense of exclusivity and urgency among truly motivated buyers. This approach often leads to stronger offers, more favorable contract terms. Rest assured, your home will be actively and strategically marketed. I think that's really interesting. That does make sense. I don't think that is. I don't think you're off base there. What's hard though is making statements about this and being able to prove it, right? That's the hard part because we don't have data on this necessarily to say that if I don't put it on Zillow, we're going to get more active, more serious buyers. We're kind of speculating, right? And so I think you have to be careful about being definitive because at the end of the day, if that seller comes back and they sue you, because here's what would happen is you would list their property, you would do this thing, you would keep it off of Zillow, they sell their property for $300,000. And then next week after closing, their neighbor puts their house on the market, basically the same, substantially similar house, and they sell it for $330,000, and they did put it actively, across the market. They're going to get mad and come back to you and say, well, you convinced me to keep it off the market, and here my neighbor sold it 15 days later, 30 days later for $30,000 more. I'm suing you because you told me that we would get a better deal, right? It's hard. That's the hard part here is like, I don't know that I can prove if I had to defend myself where I got that information. It's like, okay, well, did you tell them that we would get, just more consistent, like better buyers and not kicking the tires kind of buyers? Well, yes. Well, how do you know? Well, I don't have data. I can't prove that. And so that gets really hard to defend yourself. And so I don't think you're wrong in sort of the idea that you're thinking through. I just think you should be very careful about how you might word something like that because it could potentially be release of liability. Yeah, maybe. Sometimes, depends on what judge you get. So just something to think through is when we make those kinds of claims, we just have to be careful because I have to be able to prove it at some point. And we just don't, it's hard to say at this point whether we have that data or something. So real quick, I do want to run through, again, sort of the options because there's different categories we have now. So I made a little chart here. We're going to go through these. So coming soon is something that we've had for a while, right? Coming soon, does it allow you to show the property? No, it does not, right? Coming soon, you can't show it. But is it on the internet? Yes. Great. That's how coming soon works. I think there's a great way to market properties using that. That could be a tool that we have available. The new thing is this delayed marketing, and this is the piece that's basically the inverse. Is it on the internet? No. But can we show it? And is it on the MLS? Yes. So it's basically the opposite of a coming soon. Again, when will we use that? We'll see. Then we have office exclusives. And so can we show it? Well, first of all, it's not on the internet, right? And can we show it? This is sort of like because we can market it internally to our brokerage, to all of our, existing clients. And then we also have that ability to one-to-one contact other brokers based on this new guidance that would be available. And then active, of course, yes, it's able to be shown. Yes, it's on the internet. So the idea I think they're coming up with here, if you really think about why they would do this, because I think this gets a little convoluted. I think the reason is one, they're trying to open up options so that when the Catchmark and these other class action lawyers, they've still been up our hind end on this stuff and saying, we're watching what you're doing. They've been very critical of clear cooperation. Compass is one of the brokerages that's very clearly against clear cooperation. And so NAR is trying to open the field a little bit to say, look, we give a lot of consumer choice. Clear cooperation is still good, but we give these secondary options for sellers who it might be good for, so that it's harder for somebody to challenge it and come in and say, you're taking away choice from sellers. And it's like, no, we have all these options. Okay, you said you're concerned about privacy. Great. We've got ways that we can keep it off the internet. You said, well, office exclusives, I can't even talk one-to-one to somebody else. Great. You can talk one-to-one to other people, while still maintaining the core of clear cooperation is that it's good for consumers to have a broad open marketplace with access to listings. And so unless you fit one of these niche little exceptions, you should really be putting your listings in the MLS, opening it up to the broad market, because the data shows that's how we get the best deal for the seller. So the other thing NAR is doing is they're trying to get a little bit of the liability off themselves, because they kick this to the MLSs. Every MLS gets to decide on their own how they're going to do it. And so they're trying to say, we're not setting the policy. Each MLS individually gets to do it. That makes it a whole lot harder for these class action lawyers to come back and sue NAR again. They got to sort through the however many thousand MLSs there are in the country and decide who they think is doing it bad and go after them individually. So that's a little bit of commentary. I'm speculating a touch on there. But at the end of the day, what has changed? I don't think a whole lot has changed. I think that we have this idea where the seller can choose to, for a period of time, whatever the MLS sets as a maximum, can keep it off the internet, and then it automatically goes on there. There might be reasons to do that. Just be sure that you fully understand what these different options are, and how that might work. Again, it's not something that I foresee a lot of people taking advantage of, because I don't think there's a lot of, again, I think in most cases it makes sense to just put it on the MLS and put it on Zillow and everywhere else the buyers are, and let's just get this property sold. So understand this isn't like a big deal, but it is a change that some of these things are going to continue to evolve. I suspect we'll see more of this. Again, what does the DOJ think? They recently weighed in and said, some of these people have been saying we're against clear cooperation. That's misleading. That's not our position. We don't have one on it yet, so we don't really know what they think. Obviously, we have brokers like Compass that are against it. Catchmark and some of these class action lawyer guys are against it. NAR is fighting for it. Zillow's fighting for it. And by the way, this new delayed marketing thing is going to be a little bit of a thumb in Zillow's eye and Homes.com and Realtor.com, because this keeps those listings off of their portals, which they don't like. So that's going to create a little bit of a, they're going to be like, hey, we've been defending clear cooperation this whole time, and here you go, creating this thing that will keep properties off of our platforms. I thought we were friends. Are we not friends anymore? It'll be interesting to see what that dynamic turns into. So I'm going to stick on for a minute here. Drop any questions or thoughts you have. Or let me know if this was helpful, if that helps kind of explain things in a little bit more detail. I hope it was helpful. But yeah, stay tuned to this stuff, because obviously this is important. This is where that expertise comes in, to be able to give all those options to sellers and say, look, we got a lot of different ways we can sell your property, a lot of different options for you. So let's figure out what's going to be best for this property in this marketplace right now. And remember, at the end of the day, when we take a listing, our job is to get the best deal for that seller, whatever the best deal for them is. Maybe that's the most money. Maybe that is other factors, right? Maybe it's price isn't the most important factor. But I worry in some cases that some people might start looking at this as, how do I make this best for me and not necessarily best for the consumer? That's where we potentially run into some problems. So for those of you that hung on, I appreciate you guys joining me. It was awesome. I love to do these kinds of things. So again, I hope that was helpful. I hope you got a little bit of background and knowledge on there. By all means, leave a comment. Happy to respond, and appreciate you guys being here. But yeah, you guys are amazing. Cooperate, clearly. That's our rule from here on out. So But if there's nothing, I'm going to end the live here. And if there's any other comments, I'll swing back by, make sure I answer those and respond. But thank you guys for tuning in. We'll throw this up on our YouTube channel. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go search out our Pro Academy on YouTube. We were actually live on YouTube as well, not just Facebook. But I'd love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. We put a lot of good content out there, and we'll put this up there on the YouTube channel as well. So it's available for anyone else to see if they want to. And otherwise, if you haven't subscribed to our email address or our email list, go do that too. rpro.academy, hook up to our email list, and we'll send you something good if you do. Otherwise, thank you guys for being here, and we'll do this again. Talk to you soon.